Thank you for joining us. So just a very quick introduction of this interview series. It is part of our Stevens Leadership Portal. It's one of the initiatives at our school. It's a new initiative. So our purpose is to provide leader stories, cutting edge research, and hopefully building learning communities around leadership, around technology and inclusivity through this web-based knowledge portal. And we're doing events to support and accumulate knowledge and leader stories for our web portal, so it's accessible by everyone at any time. Our web portal, which is sort of our experimental site, is in my background, and we're expecting to start sharing it with everyone later this month. So this is this semester, we're doing this Women Leaders in Technology series, and we are featuring 6 top-level women leaders. Today, it's my great pleasure to have a conversation with Elaine Turville. And Elaine, thank you so much for coming and sharing your time and experience and stories with us. Elaine Turville is a managing director at Accenture. She manages the Department of Agriculture Client Relationship for Accenture Federal Services. Her skill sets includes data, design thinking, and cloud application technology, and consulting with various federal agencies, foundations, and nonprofits across the United States. She also supports Accenture's local corporate citizenship program, which brings the best commercial practices to help transform small local community nonprofits. Elaine has also been recognized as a top female leader in the technology industry by various organizations. So without further ado, welcome, Elaine. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Dr. Zhang, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited, and it seems like I have a bunch of really big shoes to fill based on some of the other speakers that are behind you, and my lifelong mentor, Lisa Mascola, who's on the screen behind you. Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing alumni.
And connections. Yes. Lisa is the person who connected me with you and some other speakers in this whole series. So definitely a great big shout out to Lisa. So Elaine, could you start by sharing with us how you got interested in technology? I know you graduated with a degree in economics from the College of William and Mary. So how did you transition into this technology sector?
It's a great question. And a shout out to all of my Accenture people who have joined. I'm excited to see you guys on the call today. So it's an interesting story. So while I was at William and Mary, which is heavy liberal arts, I actually did a lot of my liberal arts education in the first 2 years and decided when I wanted to go into economics, I really wanted to try more of the science side of it. And so my economics degree is actually in science, and heavily focused in sort of research and data and some of the components that you can focus on in undergrad. So it wasn't as intense, I think, as some others and some other scientific degrees, but that really started getting me excited about the power of data, the power of knowledge, that sort of gave me like the in on technology. And so when I was interviewing for potential opportunities, I got really excited about Anderson Consulting at the time. And so Anderson Consulting is what turned into Accenture, but it was the technology side of consulting versus there was more of an accounting and business side of Anderson at that point in time. And I had always enjoyed logic problems, solving problems. I'm not that great at math, but the conceptual idea of flow and how information flows was what really got me hooked. And then once I joined Anderson Consulting and started engaging in a lot of the training and component areas, I got even more and more hooked. I joined in our process practice, which was heavily focused on process mapping and understanding really more like deep supply operations. And as I went further and further into the company and understood the power of technology, I think by about year 4, I realized I really wanted to grow into the technology spaces and push to be more present, engaged, and be considered for technology projects. So that's really how it started. It wasn't like an overnight thing. It was more of an interest. And I kept getting more and more interested in that side of what we were doing and wanted to learn and grow more.
Interesting experience, because some of our previous interviewees, they started in technology in school and they built up their career that way. So your experience is slightly different, and I'm sure it will be very informative to some of our audience members who probably are not in technology now, but very interested in getting in. So from that perspective, so you made a career change or career jump,
Right.
so to speak.
Big.
So what helped you to gain credibility or reputation or visibility at the maybe earlier part of your career when you just got into technology? What helped you stand out and gain those recognitions as a leader in this space?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think when I think of technology, I think of it really as a spectrum. And I think there are a lot of people, and I talk to our interviewees who are potentially coming into the firm who are sometimes intimidated by technology. And I actually really challenge and push them because I think about it truly as the spectrum. Um, Dr. Zhang, that you were talking about, those who sort of like grew up in technology and understanding, like my daughter. So I have her, she's 10. She loves math. We have her in Code Ninjas. She loves coding. So I'm hoping that she will stick with it and not get discouraged or frustrated or sort of feel like it's not the right place for her. But someone like her who may grow up actually being exposed to technology from an early age, to someone like me who wasn't and didn't have those sort of benefits. I read a ton. I was interested in other things. I went through a more liberal arts degree. But when I came to a point in time, I was actually able to make the decision to use the resources inside the firm to further hone and further grow my skills. So some of the things I ended up doing in those early years was digging in and taking a lot of the training that was offered to me and leaning in instead of leaning out. Seeking those harder things to try and figure out, spending time tackling some of the technology areas that I was unfamiliar with, and really exposing myself to a lot of things that I may not have done in the past. And some of the ways I think I was able to advocate and promote myself was actually being pretty upfront about what my desires were. And I shared a story about my past where about 4 years into the working at Accenture, Anderson Consulting at the time, I was presented with an opportunity to either take more of a process role or consider a more technical role. And I was very excited about the technical role. I was going to become a dev lead. And I laugh now when I think about how hard I pushed for this role. It was to lead a small team out in Colorado doing some pretty technical development for one of the large telecoms. And I understood the functional process side like a glove, like it was perfect for me. And I really wanted to dig in and understand the technology side. And at first I was told no, that I wasn't qualified for the role. Well, that got me really stirred up. And I wanted to understand why. And so I was told that I didn't have the skills. So I dug in, I bought a book, I taught myself how to code. I created a bunch of like small little things that indicated I understood how to code. I went and I actually talked to the team that was doing, and then I asked for a discussion on it. And I was told I had to formally interview for this job, which surprised me because role assignments inside the firm sometimes are more casual. But I came prepared. I came prepared with what I knew, what I understood about the technical problems, the types of environment that we were going to code in, the types of technical tools that the client was using, and how I really thought that I could bring a different perspective to the team. Instead of being like the hardcore technology person, that I could actually bring a functional side to pair with their deep technology skills and make sure that the client was engaged through the process. And so after pushing and pushing, I finally did get the role. And I actually loved that role. It was great. I dug in. I learned so much about complex systems, about how to break down development work into small bite-sized chunks. The technology members on the team taught me a ton, and I learned, and I think they appreciated having someone who thought differently than they did and brought different ideas and actually took the perspective of the client to the table. So it took a lot. It took me advocating for myself to be able to take on that role, but it also took a lot of work for me to actually get those skills, dig in, and make sure I was prepared for what I was signing up for.
That's a wonderful example of self-advocacy. And in a lot of the interviews in my previous research with women executives from various industries, one of the challenges is self-advocacy, right? I remember one woman top CEO actually told me, she said, well, my women reports usually say, well, I'm doing well in this and I'm happy in my role, but if you need me, I can do bigger roles. Versus my male subordinates will say, well, I want that role, I want that director role, I want that vice president role.
Right.
And so there's the sort of the balance. How do you balance? And you were very self-advocating and assertive for yourself and your interest areas. On the other hand, some people are worried about being seen as too aggressive or ambitious, too
Right.
ambitious or something like that. How do you balance that? How do you know where the line is?
Uh, it's tough. And I think the more senior you get, that line becomes harder to see and understand. And so I think earlier in my career, I was asking for a role that wasn't like outside of the realm. Um, and so I think you have to be really authentic in what you're asking for. And really understand where your strengths are and be pretty open with yourself about where things would be a stretch. But I think also be confident. Um, so, we talked about Lisa Mascola. She is one of my mentors. And I remember at different points in my career with her. And at one point, like I really wanted a very specific role. And I remember talking to her about it. And her advice was lay out what the role is and ask for it and be unwavering. Really indicate what you bring to the table, even if it's different than some of your male counterparts, and put it out there that you want it. And I did it in a way where I was not trying to be overconfident. I was trying to be truly authentic to the person that I was and the things that I would bring to the table. And so I think you have to play to your strengths. And if you are bringing certain areas, and I think what I ended up being able to get that role. It was later in my career, I was asking to help Accenture stand up our nonprofit practice at the time. So more of a non-technical role, but something that I was deeply passionate about. And so that the line is hard. I think you have to know who you're talking to and you have to know yourself and be really authentic about what you're asking for.
Great insights. Thank you for that. So you're asking for this new thing, but you are also framing it as how you can contribute to the
Right.
project,
Yeah.
not just something that you personally would benefit
Mhm.
alone, but something that can benefit the project.
Right. Like why I could help them, like what I brought
Mm,
to the table that would be different than someone else bringing to the table. And
mm,
I would be special for it. And so really focusing on the strengths that I bring
mm,
versus like me wanting it, what would
mm.
actually be good for that person who is looking to grow that area or that or complete that project.
I see. Interesting. And some of the my interviewees talked about this personal branding, like how do I
Mm.
stand out? Is this how you approach it, or you had a different branding at the beginning and you evolved? How does your branding
Yeah,
evolve? What
it's
do you think?
that is it's crazy. I feel like you have to evolve your branding every few years. And if I look back on my career, and I think it will continue to be this way, I find that every 5 years or so, I need to do something inherently different. Now, I've been at Accenture for almost 25 years this summer, but I found it's a big enough space for me to do a lot of different roles inside of it. I tend to be pretty risk averse, and I really love the people I work with. So I've always been able to find the kind of work I want to do inside. But I do make drastic changes inside the firm from going through like being in telecom and a more technical role to I moved into government and I was helping do technology transformation on the business side to I moved to Africa and then started our nonprofit practice to I went back and tried to turn around like a client that we had that was really tough. And I feel like with each one of those career changes you make, you have to think about the branding of you and sort of what you're going to bring to the project, both to fulfill the requirements of that job, but also really to make yourself happy.
Mm,
And I did find that a few years ago, I really felt stuck. Like I felt like I could not figure out that branding. And I actually took a step back and someone recommended a coach for me to start working through that, to take a step back, understand at that point in my career, what were some of the strengths and how do I approach things in a way where I could rebrand myself. And I needed to do that at the time. And I'm a pretty extroverted person. I love working with teams. I love working with clients. And one of the things that I feel like I do really well is I'm like a deep connector. I connect with lots of different people, and not for just the sake of connecting, but also to like help make connections to solve problems. And so one of the things that I had learned in this branding or learned in this coaching was Accenture has such a culture of delivery that I was trying to continually be that delivery person and like checking off the list and making sure stuff got done, that I didn't think I could really drive out these other things that I felt were really important. And one of them is like, how do you help explain technology to clients? And I feel that that is something that I do really well. And so I had sort of taken a back seat on doing that. And this coaching helped me to understand that that's a really valuable role. And it made me put it out in front and really step into that role with pride and do that a whole lot more, which has then made my personal engagement with work go up. It's helped me to sort of empower and explain to a number of my team members to find their same way. And so, that idea of creating a branding, I think is important. You've got to think about where you are in your career and what you bring, but also be comfortable enough to pivot and know that it does change. So you're not always going to have that same branding at every stage in your career.
Mm. So what are some brands, personal brands you have used? For example, now you talk about you're translating or explaining technology to clients, which is that's the reason for our topic today, which is how do we translate
Yeah,
technology? And I'll pursue that line of question
yeah,
just
totally.
slightly later. But before that, what kind of personal brands have you developed or have evolved? Maybe
Yeah.
a few examples?
Sure. So when I first started out, I was that super dependable person who could be trusted to execute and like execute flawlessly. And that was really my brand. I would be the person who got tossed into hard projects to go figure them out and organize them and execute them. That was the first part. And that was like the first 4 or 5 years. And I think I did that really well. And I was relied on pretty heavily by leadership to always be that person that if there was something hard, I'd get it done. And then I moved more into, I started my path towards translation. I took a role helping a federal agency really think about their future technology needs. And I started this being in more of this role of the technology translator, but also deeply understanding the business processes that the clients were trying to help turn into technology pieces. So I took from my process side that where I was previously, and I brought that to bear with helping them to see the future. So I became more of like a futurist, like the what if we could do these things? And I helped them to vision and inspire a number of their technology future projects. And so that's where I spent the next bit of my career. And then I needed a really big break. And so that's when I went and did a project overseas. And I came back and started our nonprofit practice. And in nonprofits and with the work I was doing, a lot of it continued on the reimagining process, but really helping to think about helping clients to understand how to use technology wisely. In most nonprofits, technology budgets are pretty small. When they decide to invest in technology, it has to be really important to them, and it has to be a real consensus-driven decision for them to help resolve a number of problems. So I spent a bit of time really trying to figure out how I could be the link between the decision makers and those who are actually really using the technology on the ground to make sure it met both needs, both price and cost, as well as truly delivering on the benefits. And I spent a bunch of time with a lot of nonprofits really helping to think about technology in a new way. And so then when I finally made my last pivot to the project I'm in now, it became much more of this, technology advocate, really starting to help clients think about technology, advocating for technology, explaining technology, coaching on technology. Because a lot of times, senior leaders don't want to ask, what does that really mean? And I lead by example in a lot of cases, because when I don't understand, I have no qualms about asking people how things work. Like I have individuals on the team here who help me in different technology platforms. I'm like, can you explain exactly how that works? Or like, I'm missing this here. And so I need to understand so that I can then help to advocate for clients. And so it's been to me like this kind of gradual shifting of the sort of branding that I want to bring around technology. I am not the deep technology expert who understands everything. I definitely feel that I rely on those individuals who help me, and I act as sort of the translator to those who really need help in understanding what they can do with technology. And I feel like
Excellent.
there's a role for all of us.
Thank you for sharing all the brands, the involvement of your personal brands, which is very illuminating. So let's pick up the thread related to translating. So could you say more about that? First of all, why is it difficult, and what are some usual barriers for clients to understand or adopt, or how do you take care or diffuse some of the fear related to new technologies?
Yeah. So I find that when I'm working with clients, they're heavily focused on the areas that they do really well. Most of them are focused in the mission space, so they're experts on food, they're experts on housing, they're experts on forestry, they're experts in truly that mission. And when you start thinking about nonprofits, you add a whole nother dimension. And so, they've spent years training in that training and understanding and working with their clients in that space. And so a lot of times I think their approach to technology is not of, hey, I have a ton of extra time, I'm going to go read and understand this. I think there's a lot of willingness in clients to understand some of the new technology trends. But I think sometimes the way they get communicated or the way they get talked about, or when you read them in the press, they're super hyped up. And then, I'm not sure that they're easily consumable. So I have found that recently in the work that I tend to do with clients is being that translation person. What is RPA? What is AI? Is it someone's going to take my job? Because that's what you hear about in the press, right? And no, it's not that. Here's exactly what it does. And I found that if I can simply explain what those technologies do in a very simple way, using use cases that make sense to them, you can see the light bulbs go off and people are like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. I would love to do something like that, or we need that help, or that would be super helpful in this space. But it's taking the time to put it in their world and explaining technology to reframing it in a way that makes a whole lot of sense for those who may not live it and breathe it every single day. And so when I actually dig in to try and understand, and I'm like, what's RPA? What's AI? Can you explain that to me? I do have the luxury of being able to spend a bunch of time with teams digging in. Accenture has amazing training. I actually find YouTube has a bunch of amazing training where I actually can go out and watch really quick videos of people explaining things. And I use those to sort of like dig in and understand where I may not have the full technology set. And so I have found that ability to translate or to put something in someone else's understanding is really valuable to them, because I think clients appreciate, or the clients I work with appreciate understanding technology in a consumable way versus it being something that they may read about or hear that buzzword.
Interesting. Technology as in a consumable way.
Mhm.
I like that, because
Yeah.
usually you think about technology something controlling way, right? In a controlling way. So that's a
I,
good angle. I like
I think there's
that.
that is true also.
Right. Would you mind sharing with us just one or two examples of projects or clients you've had, either nonprofit or federal government, so that our audience have some examples in mind when you talk about projects like that?
Yeah. So I've had the chance to work with large federal departments who spend a lot of time with farmers and producers out in the field, and helping those agricultural producers to get access to the benefits from the federal government. We've been working on a long-term project for them, and they had decided to buy a technology platform. And I think as soon as you say those words, individuals who are daily helping producers out in the field are like, I don't under, a platform. What is a platform versus right now I have a piece of paper, I work with them, we document it, I'm able to sort of enter this in and I get their benefit quickly. And I've been working on this effort for quite a bit of time, about the last 3 years. And it's been an amazing journey for myself, but it's also been an amazing journey, I think, for a number of the clients, as well as those who are out in the field. And I think what's made it really special is the thought we were just talking about, introducing technology in bite-sized chunks to individuals who have grown up in specific ways, meaning like who have grown up potentially out in a field, or not using technology, or not even having broadband access. And so when you think about during that individual's lifetime, or during their tenure as a farmer or producer, the concept of moving from paper into, I actually submit something from my tractor, if you were to talk to anybody about it, seems pretty extreme, right? When you think about someone who may not have exposure day to day to technology, but being able to work with those clients to help them understand the benefits of leveraging technology, explaining what these changes mean. Like, hey, actually now, instead of a piece of paper that goes into the office, you can log on from the same computer you do your taxes on, and you could submit it like your taxes. You can fill out a form that makes it easy, and you can submit, and you can get sort of the same sort of benefits. And I think by linking the kinds of activities that you're trying to modernize to things that they may understand already, like paying your taxes, or registering your car, or some of those consumable technology components that have already been modernized, helps to break down some of the barriers. And so that's been, it's been pretty incredible to see sort of the change. And then when you think about the impact on employees who no longer have to take a form or have to re-enter something, and they're able to spend more time with that customer, it's life-changing. And so that is one of the projects that I've been able to work on. Another one for nonprofits that I did that was really incredibly cool was helping a really large organization that supports smaller nonprofits that work with the communities who are disabled and blind to get jobs. And there's a pretty strong network built up around types of work that disabled individuals can qualify for and deliver. But the nonprofit, the foundation I was working for, thought we should actually be creating more, and not more of the same jobs, but more new jobs. And technology should enable us to create new jobs. And so we spent a lot of time working with them on like an innovation fund or an innovation grant. They knew there were ideas out there, and they knew in the world of nonprofits across the US doing this type of work that there were cool ideas that just needed seed investment to get going, that could create entirely new lines of business. But they didn't know how to tap into it. And so we helped them set up a very simple innovation fund and granting program for them. This was not a technology effort. This was literally more of like a communication connection. We leveraged some simple technology to submit an idea, to rank applications, to grant. But what was really interesting was the amount of they thought they may get like 4 or 5. They ended up getting like almost 100 ideas submitted. They did not even have enough money in their fund to do a number of these projects. So they were going into to ask for more money for the next year already. But they were able to grant about 4 or 5 of them to start. And those, they were able to do small grants to those innovative nonprofits who came up with amazing ideas. And from that, they were able to start a whole new line of business around decomposing recyclable technology. And so it created this entire line of business, which created a number of jobs for those who are blind and disabled. And it was pretty amazing for me to be able to participate in that, because it was this idea of a simple effort, meaning it was not overly complex in terms of technology, was able to connect these people out in the field who had great ideas with these individuals who had funds. And so those are just two thoughts of things that are deeply, emotional to me. And I feel like a ton of pride of being able to engage and really help different citizens' lives change through technology.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing those 2 examples. Very interesting and inspiring. So those kind of technological changes, do they usually stem from the organization recognizing there's a need, and then they come to you and you help them find a solution? Or you have some ideas of technological solutions that might be useful to them. And so where does the change initiate, and how do you create momentum for it? So for example, let's imagine that Stevens, our university,
Yep.
is thinking about some changes. They come to you. How do you get started? How do you sort of try to help to generate change in the whole organization? So it's not just a few individuals saying we need this.
Mhm.
But then how does the process work? How would you approach it?
Yeah, no, I think it happens both ways. And I've been on projects, or I've helped clients who have a very specific need in mind. And I've also helped clients where I've taken the time or have really understood what's going on in a business problem and brought it to them with an idea. So right now, for the clients that I help in the industries that I work in around agriculture and housing, I spend some time over in broadband. I spend some time over in forestry. I actually spend a ton of time reading and listening to podcasts. And my team will tease me because when I hear something really interesting, and it's usually early in the morning when I'm walking or late in the night sometimes when I'm reading because I can't sleep, I will send these podcasts to them, or I'll send this book idea to them with, wouldn't it be cool if we could do insert X? What if we could like help to understand? One of the things we're thinking about right now is, what if we could understand homelessness, and like, what are the factors that go into it? And, is it lack of access to housing? Is it unsafe housing? Is it housing versus jobs? Like, why are we having such a homelessness crisis in terms of available housing at specific price points? And we're not a think tank, but we do really interesting sort of data research around big topics that are happening in the news right now. And so I get super excited about reading a number of things from a number of different sources, putting things together with like an idea, just a conceptual idea of like, hey, we understand that you have this problem, this kernel of this problem. What if we could put technology to it and solve it? And so then we take those big ideas in to clients to see, is this something? We read about it and we think that you're having this problem, but we're not 100% sure. Would this be of interest? And we dig in and we try to figure out what the really difficult processes are, how we could apply technology if it makes sense. Are they already using technology? Are they not? And in some cases it works and we move forward and we do a really interesting project. And sometimes the clients are like, hey, that's great, but that actually isn't our biggest problem. This is our biggest problem. And we get pointed over to where they're actually having some difficulties, and we go over there and tackle it. And so I really think of my job right now as like being very helpful in solving really difficult problems and bringing technology to solve those problems. And so it happens both ways. It happens with us generating things or coming up with things of like this. I will constantly go back to the like, what if? Or sometimes clients are like, I cannot do this. I received a call the other day where a client said, I'm having so many problems. My field-based institutions have to send me these PDFs where they fill out the PDF on a computer. They then print it. They then scan it and send it to me. And I cannot get all that data aggregated back. And I'm spending a bunch of time either retyping or X, Y, and Z. And, when you think about some new technology around OCR and sort of like being able to read and like being able to ingest that into data, I said, I'm not going to say that's an easy problem to solve because I think they've been tackling it for a while, but I do think that there are things that could tackle a big chunk of it. And I love those calls because I love digging in and figuring it out and thinking about it and offering some ideas and like understanding what's the real problem and figuring out how do you solve the small tech thing, but actually, how do you solve the bigger process problem? Why are they going to a website and downloading a form and then printing it out and then scanning it? Like that actually seems like the bigger problem. You can solve the small tech, but you could actually solve a much bigger problem also. And so thinking about things in lots of different ways.
That's so interesting. I'd like to get that technology too. All the files and PDFs that we need to integrate them much better. We all need some help. Right. Just an integrator, information integrator would be great.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, by the way, myself next, information integrator.
Yes. So you mentioned podcast. I'm sure a lot of our audience members are interested in what podcast you are following and listening to, because you're identifying the big problems, the big trends and big problems to solve.
Oh my gosh.
Which are some common ones?
I love podcasts. So I do listen to a ton of like Politico and The Daily, but I also listen to Kara Swisher's Sway. That one helps me
Yep.
with a lot of the deep technology things, especially when you were referencing like technology. Technology is a controller. But I think that is high on my list. I'm actually like digging in. I do listen to Life Kit, which helps me a lot in certain ways. I love Freakonomics, and I love
I do too.
and I love NPR Planet Money and Consider This and Code Switch and Make Me Smart. So there's a ton, and there are a ton of one-off technology ones where people will share with me and I will dig in and engage in a number of those. But I find myself, I think, more understanding, and I get a number of subscription emails like from Politico Technology, where I'm trying to understand the sort of regulation environment around technology versus where my clients are struggling with technology. So the broadband issue right now is super fascinating when you think about sort of the regulated environment plus the real need for clients out in rural community, or excuse me, citizens out in, or people out in rural communities who need access to high-speed internet for school, for being able to drive jobs, for being able to do much of the things that we take for granted by being in urban centers. And so that is one of the areas where I spend a lot of time trying to understand the intersection of those in my podcasts and in my daily email digest.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And what kind of circles or groups do you have? Groups you go to, a community that lift you up or keep you informed, in addition to the podcast?
Yeah. So, well, I actually have a really amazing group. One, I have an amazing set of team members that I work with, and I get to spend a ton of time with them. And they are amazing and brilliant technologists, and they help me to understand and spend a lot of time like digging in and throwing a bunch of ideas at the table. So I have people who understand platforms and digital platforms and people who understand analytics, and I get to spend a lot of time learning from them. But I also have this, and you'll think it's funny, we have a Accenture alumni, women's alumni network, of course, where Lisa Mascolo is in, and there's about 18 of us women who were women in technology, who once used to work together at Accenture, but now work across many different places, IBM, Maximus, a number of EY. And so we actually spend a lot of time sharing thoughts and ideas together, and also like propping each other up. And so one of the women in the group was named the CEO of a big company the other day. And we end up having these like all of these emails back and forth. And another woman used to work for the governor of Maryland. And when there were some of the upset and unrest, you could see her standing behind, and we would all send emails back about how amazing she was. And we get together like once or twice a year to really prop each other up and talk about career advice. And I know each one of them is always there when I have different questions or concerns, or like, how would you navigate that? Or how would you think about this? And that's sort of my informal career mentors who are always there to help me with things.
Excellent. We all need a community to lift us
We
up.
all need a community. I agree. And it wasn't one, it was not one that we planned on having, but we decided years ago, I can't remember what it was, but we decided that we were all still at Accenture, and we were like, we need to go away for a weekend. So we took this bus out to this place, and we had this amazingly fun weekend, and that it just stuck, this group. And we've done this year after year and have this pretty tight community of people who have always just been there for each other.
Wow, that is amazing. That is
Yeah, I'm pretty
amazing.
lucky with them.
So great. So let's transition just a little bit, talk about being a woman working in technology, especially a woman leader. So have you experienced what we usually label as glass ceiling, or sometimes we're made to feel we are less credible because people don't know us yet, or feel unfairly treated, or things like that? Have you experienced those? How do you navigate those situations?
Yeah, no, it's a great, I think everyone, and myself included, have experienced less about, I think I've had less about like hitting the ceiling per se, and more about maybe not being in the room and maybe not being thought of in the room. And so I think that's what I feel like sometimes I end up in engaging or feeling concerned about more, is how do you make sure people know and understand your career ambitions and like what you want to do next? And I'm not sure I would tie it so much to being part of the technology realm as much as, being a senior woman, navigating a career and making sure that people really understand. Now, the technology part does add a number of aspects, because I think that it puts you in an environment where there's even less women at the table. And most of the time, I go back to what we talked about earlier, is a lot of it is advocating for yourself in an authentic way. And so there have been times where I feel, passed for promotions, and sometimes I agreed with it. And sometimes I actually was just hurt and frustrated by it, and had to take a second and take a pause and ask a ton of questions, and then figure out a path to change it, and figure out a path to, one, how can I advocate for myself and make sure people understand what I'm doing? Or two, take on new roles and responsibilities to get those skills and capabilities to actually get to the next level. So I do find having a strong network of people inside wherever you work or outside of wherever you work who truly understand what you can do, who will tap you on the shoulder and ask you, I always call it the put me in coach. I want people who are going to tap me on the shoulder and say, I can trust you with this really hard thing. So I'm going to put you in, or I'm going to ask you to take it on. And then there's the counter side, where I do think sometimes, women tend to say, oh no, I can't do that, or I'm not ready for that. And I have experienced it with some of my team members when I ask them to take on big, hairy new roles. There sometimes is a bit of hesitancy. And so I spend a lot of time with future up and coming women, trying to make sure that they know they can do it. I wouldn't ask them to do something if I didn't know they could do it. And by asking them to do something, I also am giving them the space and help to make sure that they're successful in doing it. And so I feel it goes both ways, that we as women, have to advocate for self, but we also have to look back or look across and advocate for those of us that are also trying to make it through at the same point in time. And so I feel like I have a really strong peer set in Accenture where I work, and we all advocate for each other. When people are going up for new roles, I find that I'm always like, hey, I think that person would be great in this role for X, Y, and Z, and making sure that my opinion is heard, as well as, constantly advocating for those individuals who work with me. So it's not easy. I think it's getting easier. I do think some of the focus areas recently in corporate America about releasing inclusion and diversity data and making strong commitments have driven visibility and are making the problem more visible, making more people aware of it. And I think that we just have to use that in conjunction with continuing to advocate for ourselves, but also helping and pulling those others behind you up.
Wonderful. Thank you. So self-advocacy plus allies.
Yes, lots of allies. That's a great way to say it. Allyship is important.
Well, you mentioned chunks. So what are some of your chunks?
Oh, so if I think about, to me, the way I sort of logically break up. So analytics, AI and analytics, RPA, sort of the technologies that deal with data. And then I think more of the user experience sort of technologies, where you have digital platforms that are interface technologies. Like I'm entering in information that's going to go into a different kind of workflow. And then I continue to think more in cloud, right? Those specific technologies that are helping you to host or manage applications in the cloud. And then I think of security, cyber, how and what am I using to protect? And I know that cuts out a number of things, because then you've got ERP applications, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if I think in terms of those big areas, and I think of them in sort of these chunks of how can I think about a chunk? How can I know enough about these chunks and really understand more? Accenture has these, what we call technology TQ areas. There are 6 core areas inside Accenture that we're supposed to know about. I've given you 4. I can't remember the other 2 right now. Don't tell Accenture that, but we're supposed to have this high level knowledge. And it's because I haven't finished my last 2. I finished 4 already in these areas to make sure that we are super knowledgeable, and they're delivered in these bite-sized chunks. And that's why I get into this bite-sized chunks, go out on the web, what are the most important things I need to know about cyber? And you can quickly get the high level across the T. And if you want to dig in, you can go down into that specific area.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
We don't have any raised hand, but anybody has a question? Well, let's finish with this question. What's
Okay,
the
sure.
best advice you've ever received? What's the worst? What's the advice you give the most? I guess it's more than one question, right? How do you sort through good advice and bad advice? All
Yeah.
about advice.
Yeah. Those are good. That's a great question. So, um, the best advice I've been given is the one around confidence and being confident in you. Like, you were smart enough to get a job here. You are smart enough to understand this and be confident in what you know, and you can learn the rest of it. And so I always keep that in the back of my mind that, I can, when those little voices in your head sort of telling you that maybe you're not good enough or maybe you don't understand, is to really be confident. And so that has been the best advice I've taken forward, is I always think back to it. The worst advice, I've gotten some really bad advice along the way. And I try to take that advice and bounce it off of someone else. So I've been able to, quickly pivot for it. But one of the worst advice I received was when I was interviewing early on. I was told to stop touching my hair so much because it made me seem less intelligent. And I was like, that is just hurtful, because I've always had long hair. I always am very animated with my hands. And I realized that was just someone projecting their own perspectives. And so I've always just continued to be me and authentically me. And that's how I engage with people. And I feel a sense of connectedness when I use my hands to talk and do things. And the advice that I tend to give a lot of people is really that, you're only in this once, and to take the risks and choose your own adventure and really ask for what you want, because you only have one shot at this, and you may as well stick up your hand and put it out there and ask for the things you want to do so that people can help you find the way.
Excellent. Excellent.
So,
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
awesome.
I remember that 2 interviews ago, we had one person who received the advice that you're laughing too much, or you're laughing too loud, or something like that, where we always receive those things about our personal quirks or how we express ourselves, right?
It is.
And sometimes not following the advice, it takes courage, right?
Yes.
And takes guts.
I did get the advice that sometimes I use too many exclamation points in emails, which I promptly responded with a whole bunch of exclamation points saying. So.
Interesting. Yeah. So that's about authenticity, who we are, right? How we express ourselves, and really finding an environment that accepts who we are so that we can be happier and productive. And yeah. So thank you so much, Elaine. This is very, very helpful.
This was awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So fun. Yes, thank you. And just before we leave, for those of you who are interested in our interview series, we have one more in 2 weeks' time with Teresa Welpert. I don't know whether you know her, right? From Lisa's group.
CEO job. Cool.
Yeah, I'll be sending out information to all our participants as well. And I'm going to put into the chat the experimental site of our website. It is really not yet. It's not refined at all. So please, if you don't mind, the typos and some incomplete information, but we do have all the audio recordings and video recordings of our interviews there. So I hope some of you may want to take advantage of the information already there. So thank you. Thank you so much.